I'm Mike Drubin. I'm the lead account relationship partner for Harvest Partners. I see a lot of familiar names, at least on the Zoom call here, and some new. Just want to welcome you all as a first and foremost. We've been kicking off a series since we met with your CFOs at a summit in March of doing, what I would call quarterly and or every now and again monthly series of, hot topic discussion pieces. One of them being, we talked about leases 842 a few weeks back. And then we've also now started on this HR one. So appreciate you all joining. What I'll say is we kind of kick off the content here is we as PwC, do quite a bit of different things, but we don't claim to know everything and anything. But I think you guys will enjoy the content today, predominantly because a lot of the people that are bringing some of, let's call it, the experience that we've all kind of encountered on the Great Resignation, not only bringing things that we've learned from other clients of what they're experiencing out in the marketplace and so forth, but a lot of what we're about to present to you today is actually based on our own sort of what we've gone through as a firm ourselves. As you know, we have a very large workforce. We have a lot of talent that we have to manage. And we hope that some of those insights and let's call it those trials and tribulations that we've experienced can be kind of passed on to you. The last thing I would want to say is as we kind of get into this, we'll be recording this if you want to, later look at it or share it with others within your team if they were unable to join today. And then second, as always, and many of you know this already, if you have any subsequent follow-up questions and want to have a one-on-one conversation with us, you're happy to do so. Please reach out to myself, Mike Drubin, David Himmel, who you may know, and also Jackie, and we'll be happy to get you guys in touch with those individuals. So with that, thanks for joining. I'm going to pass it over to Claudia and Jack, and they'll take you through the materials.
Terrific. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it. And welcome to everyone who is joining us this morning. My name is Claudia Montgomery, and I'm a managing director in the Chicago office of PwC. I've been with the firm 3 years. My background is that of a CHRO myself. So certainly I have walked in your shoes and understand the difficulties and challenges, particularly in the last 2 years. It's been a bumpy road, and I hope that what I can share with you today is a little bit more specific information about what we're seeing in the market, what we are really planning ourselves, because we're right there with you, and then some perspective just from an HR lens. What does it really mean for HR as we look to move forward? My focus at the firm is primarily culture, employee experience, leadership development, and diversity, equity, and inclusion, but I play in a lot of the talent transformation space. And we really work hard to provide integrated solutions for our clients. So I'm also very active in sort of adjacent areas to those that I've named. I'm joined by Jack Abraham, who's a colleague of mine who works in the reward space. Jack, you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Claudia, and I'll briefly introduce myself. Jack Abraham, been a partner here with over 30 years now. After 30 years, we stopped counting, so that's more than enough. And happy and a pleasure to be with everyone today, and look forward to the presentation. And as Claudia explained everything she does, I kind of fit in at the other Tetris piece. For those that remember Tetris, is that really working on the rewards side and developing the compensation, benefit, and other rewards programs to really support what we're trying to accomplish from an overall people strategy. So that's how I fit in today's call, and work with Claudia quite a bit on a number of these types of arrangements. So thank you, Claudia, and back to you.
Thanks, Jack. All right, so defying the odds of the Great Resignation, a compelling title, and I hope that you'll find the information today to be quite useful and applicable in any situation that you find yourself in. Whoops, except what did I just do here? There we go. All right, hopefully you're seeing the right thing here on the screen. All right, so we're going to cover just 4 key areas today, but I want to say a few things up front. One is I'd like to keep this very interactive. So if you would use your hand raising function in the Zoom so that you can stop me at any time. I really want this to be a conversation. This is for you. I want your questions. I want ideas that you want to share with your colleagues. It's really a round table. So let's treat it as such. We're going to talk about culture and workforce considerations first. What are we seeing in the market? What is that sort of, what's happening, what's bubbling up? As David said, lessons learned at PwC and some kind of, I'll say, rules for the road, HR considerations, and then we have plenty of time for Q&A. So if you have questions that are a little bit more robust that you think people are going to want to talk about as a group, maybe save those for the end, and then we can talk about those all together. All right, so jumping right in. This great resignation, I'm kind of getting tired of the term, I'll be honest, is affecting all of us. Doesn't matter what industry you're in, doesn't matter what size organization you are. It seems that every client is feeling the pressures of the talent marketplace. I don't really think about it as the great resignation. That's just a symptom of really what I call the great reprioritization. Because just like all of us as employees ourselves, this period of disruption over the last 2+ years has really caused all of us to sort of step back and think about our lives and about what is the role that work plays in our lives. Really, what is it that we want from work, need from work, and how does that fit into the context of our lives? So I think what we're going to talk about today is really centered on that. What is the workforce really thinking about? How have things changed? And what do we need to be mindful of as we think about the future and enabling that workforce to reach that sort of zone of high performance? So the Great Resignation, we know all the stats, we've all read them 100 times, but a frightening thought that 65% of the workforce in total is actively looking for alternate employment. That is a staggering number that we have not seen in decades. The thing that also, I think, pairs with that is, we've all looked at LinkedIn and you can sort of check the box, not actively looking, but open to opportunities. That 65% doesn't even include that. So when we think about just the sort of volume of people in the market right now, it is pretty unbelievable. When we, look at what executives are saying, our research, we do a CEO study every 6 months or so at the firm, and it is the #1 priority for many, and definitely the top 3 for most organizations that we're speaking with. So talent attraction and retention is central. And I imagine all of you would nod your heads and agree. But as we think about, this volatility that is, we hope, mostly in the rearview mirror, we recognize it's continuing, whether it's macroeconomic issues, there are sort of geopolitical things, conflicts swirling, and all of those things are having an impact on this talent conversation and our businesses as a whole. So we really have to think about what is our role in helping the executive team become very unified around these complex issues. And the people in the organization are at the center of that conversation, no matter how you slice it. So when we look at sort of what's on the minds of the executive teams, it's, of course, creating long-term sustained value and driving, a set of clear priorities. But if you look at the bottom half of this circle, you can see that both the bottom half pieces are about people, and supporting people are needed to support what appears at the top. So enhancing an EVP or employee value proposition to be able to attract and retain the talent, and building the necessary trust with employees as well as consumers. Those are 2 key drivers that are going to enable what's up on the top of this slide. So we're going to take a polling question because I want to make this interactive, as I said. So I'll just throw this out there to the group. What is the biggest challenge that your organization faces as you look to balance the needs and expectations of all the stakeholders in your organization? So A, preserving company culture. B, or 2, hiring and retaining talent. C, effectively serving your customers. 4, supporting the well-being of your workforce, or 5, upskilling your people to meet the changing needs of the business. So we'll give you a minute to read those and make a selection, then we can discuss the results. I've had a lot of conversations. I did not put all of the above on here. Did you note that? Because I don't want you to check that. I want to know what is the biggest challenge. All right, we'll see what our poll yields. Here we are. So can everybody see the results? Yep. Okay, great. So it looks like a commanding lead, hiring and retaining talent. So my assumption was obviously spot on. And I think that we all know that. Effectively serving customers, preserving company culture, and supporting the well-being of the workforce. Okay. And upskilling, we're not seeing a lot in the upskilling area. So we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through the presentation, because that is becoming, we'll say it's an emerging area that is taking on greater and greater importance. There is momentum building, because as the talent, equation becomes that much, or the pain becomes that much more acute, you have to say, okay, well, who do I already have? And maybe as the pressures of the economy continue to tighten, maybe I need to reskill some of the people that I have to take some of the roles that I'm recruiting for and I'm unsuccessfully able to fill. So that's where that upskilling or reskilling is coming into play. But we can talk a little bit more about that later. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit. I've done this again. I keep messing my screen up. Sorry, folks. I don't know how this is doing this. Sorry, it's jumping ahead. I'm having a little technical issue, so my apologies. Okay, here we are. Culture and workforce considerations. So, yeah, that's right. Okay, so we're going to just talk a little bit about the sort of basic trends that we're seeing in the market. First and foremost, we are seeing this shift. A shift in what a lot of people call the balance of power in the relationship. We used to call it the employer-employee contract. I mean, and that really speaks to a very transactional view of things. I work, get my paycheck, and in exchange for sort of the comp and ben that a traditional package would offer. And what I would challenge you to think about as an HR leader or a finance leader is that the expectations around that contract are changing, and changing fairly dramatically. It is no longer about a transactional relationship, but rather a relational circumstance where people want to have a different type of relationship with an organization. They don't really want to think about work as a place. Work is kind of a thing. And they want to think about, the idea that they work not for a company, but with an organization. So a mindset shift that does affect this sort of, as we call it, the balance of power. Employees just have a different view. And I think it challenges us to think a little bit differently. So the big issues or opportunities bubbling up are around trust and purpose, development and rewards, and choice and personalization. I'm going to touch on each. So trust and purpose. We are seeing a groundswell of sentiment toward wanting to have deep trust with one's organization. You know me, you understand my needs, you understand what I can offer, and we have a relationship that's built on trust. And people want to have a sense of purpose. They want to know what their organization stands for, what the values of the organization are, and they want to actually feel themselves that their work every day is aligned with that organizational purpose and brings meaning to their own lives. Now, that sounds sort of pie in the sky, but the reality is surveys are telling us over and again, this is real. This isn't just sort of a passing thought. This is the emerging generation of professionals is really wanting this and asking those types of questions in interviews. They want to understand what that's going to look like. Development and rewards. So we used to think of rewards as comp and ben. Now rewards is a much larger umbrella. People place value on things that you wouldn't have thought would be part of sort of the value proposition of old. So learning and development, we touched on that upskilling piece before. We know from our own workforce, they would sacrifice part of their salary if the company invested more in learning and development opportunities in the form of content learning, badging, things that are going to help credentialize them, as well as protected time to take advantage of that learning, because they recognize that that's going to help them in their careers moving forward. So employers that sort of get that and are starting to tune into that are winning in the market. It's a question a lot of recruits are asking. What type of learning and development programs are you offering? What type of technology enables the work? Because they want to be sure that you're going to be able to offer something that's compelling and can help them grow as a professional, whether they stay with you or move on someplace else. So development and rewards, compensation is always, pay is always going to be king, right? It should be, but this equation has definitely shifted. So you got to think about it. And then choice and personalization. We have 4 generations in the workforce right now, and we cannot assume that what we offer is going to be the right set of things for everyone. So we really do have to challenge ourselves to think about who are the different persona groups within an organization, and how can we structure offerings where choice is a central part of that, and how can we then take it further to personalize the offerings and help people really get excited about the things that we offer as part of that broader value proposition. So when we lean down a little bit more deeply into these broad topics, we look at our Pulse survey, which we continue to do every 6 months at PwC. It's a big survey out in the market. And we asked, really, what are the primary drivers of the value proposition beyond compensation? And what we are hearing from people are these 5 things. Flexibility in work, and that means not just for people who go to the, that are in an office setting, but flexibility, I'll say equitable flexibility across all segments of the workforce. Even if folks are on premise and need to be day-to-day for their work, it behooves an organization to think differently about what kinds of things you can offer that would afford them some type of flexibility, even if they have to be on-prem. So flexibility is really key for organizations who think, we want everybody back. Then you better be over-delivering in other areas, because this general sentiment of the workforce is that, flexibility, if I can get that somewhere else, I may go and do that because I've tasted it and it's worked out pretty well for me. We talked a little bit about personalization and choice. That's where that's coming from. Employees are really liking having choices. Interestingly, some of those choices are about how time is spent in purposeful work. Are there opportunities for volunteering that are paid by the companies so that people can get out and do meaningful things in their communities? So that's taking on a much greater weight in the value proposition. We touched on learning and upskilling already. A diverse and equitable, inclusive environment. This has really gained momentum in the last couple of years, and I think it's a wonderful correction to some things that maybe have not been working well for some time. So we will have many employees asking, does this organization have pay equity? Does this organization, or what are we doing to really make sure there is a diverse workforce, that the organization is welcoming of all types of folks, regardless of the dimensions of diversity that they are made up of, and what are we doing from an inclusion perspective? So a lot of questions there out in the talent marketplace. And then finally, a distinctive and authentic culture. Distinctive, yes, that means, I want to make sure I can talk about my company and be proud, but authentic culture really refers to having the ability to show up as who you are, as your full self, and also being part of an organization where the leaders and all the people walk the talk, right? Because we've seen the purpose and values on paper, but if it doesn't resonate and it isn't really apparent in the day-to-day work, then, that's not really of interest to people. So I think these are really great stats to bolster, initiatives that you're thinking about, because, and questions to ask in your own listening is, what is the point of view of your workforce in these particular areas? Okay, so we're going to ask another polling question. What is the top priority for your workforce? Flexible work, personalization and choice in benefits, learning and upskilling opportunities, a commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, an authentic purpose-led culture, compensation, or not really sure. And not every organization has done listening, and you may just not know. So we'll take a minute and see what the general consensus is. And this one I'm not too sure about. I'll have to be surprised by the group. I guess I can enter the poll too. All right. So we'll see that pop up in just a moment. So any questions while we can just take a pause right here. Oh, we'll look at our results first. So what is the top priority of your workforce? 20% flexible work. This is pretty evenly distributed. 8% personalization and choice in benefits. 12% learning and upskilling. So that's different than we heard on the last go around. So that's interesting. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, not as much. An authentic purpose-led culture and comp, of course, and then not sure. So very interesting. The not sure, I wonder if that's just a function of maybe not listening yet, not having the sort of, pulse surveys or feedback loops that are going to help you understand what those needs are. So if you have needs around that, certainly let me know, because we have some very, easy tools that we can help you deploy that will quickly and sort of efficiently get to that if that's something that's of use to you. We have an employee experience diagnostic that lots of our clients are using right now to try to get at what do our people value? What are the strengths and gaps and the areas of opportunity, so we can prioritize the most meaningful things. Any questions? We'll take a quick pause here. Oh, Jeremy, I see a hand raised. If you'll come off mute.
Yes, good morning. Can you hear me?
Oh. Yes, I can hear you.
Hi, Jeremy Reynolds, Chief Human Resources Officer for Affordable Care. I have 20 thoughts and 40 questions and have never met a Mike I didn't love, so I'll try to be succinct. On your last slide, I love reading this type of information, but I find it impossible for employers to do them all. And an example is, I love these surveys that say X double-digit percentage of employees would take less pay for more training, but I haven't met one of them. We don't have one of them that's offering that. And as you start thinking about that spectrum of things, it's difficult to think through trying to prioritize flexible work option and meeting an employee when and where they want to work, and also driving purposeful culture development or creating meaningful connections in ways that drive culture. And it's interesting, it'll be interesting to see companies that have moved to a very flex state, both on where and when their employees work, how they deal with their culture gaps in a year or two, maybe even closer than that, maybe 6 months down the road, because over time it deteriorates. It's very challenging to do that. Younger workers, very young workers, I think are wired to do this because of social media and app prevalence, in their life. But the majority of workers for the next few years, I think, it's going to be a real challenge for us. And then just a question here is, I would love, if you're going to get into this, great, but I would love to hear PwC's perspective on how much of this is expected from your view to continue. And the example that I'll give here is, I think a lot of younger baby boomers and older Gen X workers that exited the workforce because maybe they had lots of money all of a sudden, and their houses and their 401ks were very valuable, and they thought this is a great time to retire early. We're beginning to start to see some trends that they're coming back into the workforce. Lots of younger workers that are not quite prepared stepped up to fill those roles, a small percentage of which will be successful in those roles, but the larger majority, I would feel, won't be successful. I would love to hear PwC's perspective on how long this challenge remains in terms of many more jobs available than capable workers of filling them as younger baby boomers and Gen Xers kind of make those decisions to return to the workforce and employers begin to reintegrate them into their organization. So thank you for the time. I really appreciate this. Is great information.
Sure. So there's a lot packed in there, but I appreciate the dialogue, and my comment first is yes, yes, and yes, because these are the exact conversations we're having with every client, right? The key here is that there's no silver bullet. There's no way any organization can focus on all those things at a high level, right? And there's no one thing you can focus on that's going to be the magic that gets everybody who's there staying and everybody who's thinking about coming to come. The point of all that is, and we'll get to this in the next slide, is it's almost like every organization needs its own recipe, right? Because you are a certain type of organization with a certain type of product or service. You have a culture that already exists, and you have a value proposition that is in place now. It's just now your population has had changes in their viewpoint on things, and there's a need for some recalibration right now. But you got to pick the things that are going to be most meaningful for your organization based on the purpose, the work you do, the product or service you're selling, the purpose of your organization as a whole, and the values, because that mix is what you're going to hang your hat on. That's the differentiator in the market that's going to help you attract and retain talent. So Jeremy, I totally understand what you're saying. And yes, that prioritization is really the key. And I'm going to talk about that in my next slide. How long is this going to last? There are lots of different viewpoints on this. You can, we have a lot of different folks, even in our firm, who have different viewpoints. But I would say, based on everything I've read, we are not going to see tremendous shifts in talent availability probably for the next 10 years. And yes, there are some returners to the workforce, but not in droves yet. And this skilling question is real. I mean, we have a lot of people who are out there, but they don't have the right skills, or people in companies who don't have the right skills for the future. So that's where that upskilling and reskilling comes in. We'll see if we continue to observe folks who've left come back, but I'm not seeing a ton of that just yet. Some. Dan, you have your hand up.
Yeah, just a couple of comments. So I'm the CFO at Advanced Dermatology. We employ about 800 medical assistants who are sort of at the lower end of the pay scale. A year ago, they were making $15, $16 an hour, and we have to be paying them, in $20, $22, sometimes $24 an hour now, which is a huge increase in our cost base. But I guess my point is, I see two types of workers with I would answer this question differently. I think at that end, it's compensation is the primary motivator. But when I look at my own team in finance, it's a lot more of these softer issues. The professional, people are looking at their work differently. Compensation, of course, is important, but culture and learning and all that, I think, ends up being really important. Just anecdotally, I had a financial analyst, who was with the organization 90 days. He texted his resignation on Memorial Day, didn't come back to work, which, by the way, has not been uncommon. I guess there's a whole trend of not giving notice anymore. And his reason for not coming back was that we were too profit motivated. So not sure what to do with a financial analyst who doesn't want to work for a company that's trying to make a profit, but that's the kind of thing that we're faced with.
Yeah, it is a very disturbing trend you mentioned. Yeah, I was sort of shocked when that started to gain momentum, but it is very real. So I appreciate your comments. I think, we'll talk not only about, sort of the investment and the challenge to kind of deliver for all the different types of people in the workforce, but some of the stuff is not just investment. Some of it doesn't cost a lot. Some of it's about your ways of working. And I want to touch on that as we go forward in the presentation today, because, how much can you invest in, right? You can't put your money everywhere. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So thank you for your comments. Okay, so this represents a taxonomy for a survey that we have at PwC, and we developed it to get after exactly what Dan and Jeremy were just talking about. How do we understand what our people really value? Because and the different groups within, right? Not just people as a whole, but all the different types of people, because we really do want to offer the things that are going to matter to people. So we basically said there are 4 major areas that make up someone's, sort of work life, if you will. And we really took a human lens to this conversation. People want work that's meaningful. They want to have, a company that understands they want to develop, and they want to have a sense of purpose and meaning. They want an ecosystem that's adaptive to their needs. So it's providing the right technology, it's providing the right conditions for high performance, the right systems and tools. They want to have an inclusive culture. They want to see, number one, that their organization is really prioritizing inclusion, diversity and inclusion. They also want to feel part of a community. This speaks to culture, the point you just raised. How do we create that culture where people feel like they belong to something larger than themselves? And then leaders, they want to be a part of an organization where leaders walk the talk and are really genuine, transparent people who care. And then finally, holistic support. And this is more the sort of basic blocking and tackling, but it's rewards and well-being, comp and benefits, but also the recognition there that those broader, we'll call it total rewards, a lot focused on well-being, financial well-being, mental and physical well-being. That's all part of rewards and well-being now. And then programs and practices. So the sort of the degree to which the policies and programs and things are really aligned with individual needs and preferences. So this taxonomy is how we evaluate employee experience for ourselves as a firm and for our clients. And it may be useful to you, so that's why I'm providing it, so that you can think about these dimensions and how you're delivering against each. And the key is what's most meaningful to your organization and your people. All right, so one of the other things then coming out of this type of examination of the workforce and their sentiments is to say, okay, well, now we know what they value. How do we take that information and do something with it? How do we action it and operationalize? So we really take a human-centered design approach. We take the different persona groups that we've identified across the workforce, and we really map the journeys of each, understanding through the research that we do, what's most meaningful in terms of value, but what moments in the journey are most resonant. Like, where do they really feel like, wow, this is an important moment with with my company relationship? That's where we want to lean in. So we take this human-centered design approach. We look at the 5 segments of the workforce journey in totality, and we map the journeys out and decide where do we want to really lean in with what types of programs and what types of experiences at those moments that are going to get people to really feel like, hey, this company knows me and cares about me and they understand me. So that's just a sort of an approach that we take at the firm, which I think many organizations are beginning to adopt. This is just a quick slide I wanted to draw your attention to, because I started to talk about this before. Whereas we used to think about organizations, we talked about employee engagement, right? We're trying from the top to sort of engage people. We're shifting to a different structure, which is more of a co-created ecosystem. So yes, the organization is doing a lot of things to engage, but the employee has an expectation to be invited in to this process of co-creation. We know, with social media and all the different ways employees are weighing in on what their organizations are doing, we can fight that and continue to focus on employee engagement, or we can invite them into the conversation and work together to create an organization that works for all stakeholders. So just sort of a mindset shift there as well. And then the big question here is why? Why does it matter? Why do we really care about all this? And what it comes down to for us at PwC, and we think it should be something that all companies challenge themselves to think about, is it's right now, it's about trust. We think about what's going on in the minds of people and therefore employees. There's a trust problem in the world right now. People used to be able to trust government to help be their safety net underneath a lot of their life. And, whether that's local or, federal, whatever, it's really, people are changing their view on that, right? They're looking at the business community to provide the help they need, because they aren't necessarily getting what they need from places that they've had, support before. And so that's really changing the equation. I mean, many organizations say, well, why do I have to think about some of these things that really aren't work things? But the answer is, if they're getting in the way of productivity, then you kind of do have to think about them and help your people to work through those things in order to get them into that sort of high performance zone. So this slide is really about, thinking about how do you tap into the discretionary effort of your workforce? How do you get them from sort of that neutral middle ground to being confident and engaged and engaging in, in risk-taking and ideation and creativity and innovation? Where there's greater trust, you're able to get them to sort of, be freed from concerns, and they can focus on the work and really building things and thinking in new ways. The same goes for culture. Culture is a big piece of this, that sort of we'll call the underlayment of the employee experience. And culture is part of this trust equation. So just something to think about there. All right, I'm going to take a pause, ask if there are any questions, because we're going to move to a new section about sort of lessons learned. So anything from the group? All right, we'll keep on rolling. So next we'll talk about PwC's journey, and I've done it again. Sorry, I keep messing up my screen here. Here we go. So I actually worked on a project to take a look at the people experience at PwC. We do this on an ongoing basis, and it's sort of I'll say a rolling project, but it started to take on a new sense of urgency during the pandemic for sure. So we really dialed up our what is already our normal listening processes to really get in to understand how our people were thinking and feeling. You may not know this, but we have 55,000 people across the US. And while you may think, well, that's either relevant or irrelevant to your circumstance, people are people. We have an average age in that 55,000 of 27 years old. A lot of these folks are living in major metro areas or larger cities, and they're very young. And this whole pandemic took a toll on them. And so we really needed to dial into this, to all the folks in our workforce, but in those in particular who are newer to the workforce, because this was pretty unprecedented times. So we did a lot of that type of listening, and you can see on the screen just all the different things that we did in terms of listening to understand not only how are people thinking and feeling, but what are some of the academics out in the sort of the thought leaders around human behavior, and what could this pandemic mean for human outcomes when we finally roll out of this period. So a lot of different conversations happening there. But one of the biggest themes that emerged in our research internally was this theme of choice. More than anything else, this idea of I want to have more choices, more flexibility. And I say flexibility, not just where I work, but choice through all facets of the employee experience. That was something that bubbled to the surface for us. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So through the pandemic, we heard very loudly and clearly that well-being was a number one concern. Our folks were suffering. As I told you, a lot of them were emerging professionals. So we focused in on well-being. We focused in next on flexibility and choice. And then finally, inclusive leadership, because what we recognize in our business is that we were already working in distributed teams across the country and across the globe. And the connective tissue between the workforce and the company, and really what connects the culture and helps support the culture is those relationships between leaders, whether those are managers or anywhere up and down the line, to the people. That connection, that's really what has to sustain us in this period where everybody's isolated. So we really leaned in on that inclusive leadership piece. We also were particularly leaning into being inclusive in this period. And we are all the time at PwC, but we just wanted to be sure that during this difficult time that we were really thinking about all the different personas in our organization and what individual needs they might have that we would need to attend to during this time. So when we think about our culture, well-being is a really important component of it. And these are some of the things that we were focusing on as we were evaluating how to respond. We were looking at a mental and emotional support for our folks. We knew many of our employees have young families or elder care concerns, and we needed to be flexible and give people more of an ability to manage those aspects of their lives. Some people were suffering with productivity, and we needed to think about how we could infuse their day with inspiring learning content, things that would help them to sort of get back on track. Because they were, in some cases, I laugh, my daughter was this way. She lives in New York. She would wake up and walk about 3 steps from her bed to her desk. And then that would be work. And then she'd do the same at the end of the day. So that can, be kind of hard. Enhancing connectivity, this gets into that leadership piece. So we had a lot of huddles. We had a lot of connectivity events, day-to-day, Q&As, chat rooms, town halls, and we've really continued a lot of these practices because our people really responded positively. The benefits that people really focused in us as really meaningful things, you can see at the bottom here, but one thing we did do is we invested in making our people take vacation. Sounds so silly, but what we were finding through the pandemic is because people couldn't travel, they didn't take their vacation and they were getting burned out. So we actually paid our people $250 for every 5 consecutive days they took off. And they could redeem up to $1,000 because it was really becoming problematic and we wanted people to take that break. So anyway, that was interesting, I think, interesting strategy. We also introduced a permanent hybrid work model to give our people flexibility that in a way that worked for us and the business and the people. So 3 different options: virtual, flex, or in person. And everybody had to kind of, declare what working scenario are you going to choose. But we offered that for everybody in the organization. We do have some folks who are on-prem full-time, and we certainly look for opportunities to give them some flexibility as well. And then we talked a little bit about a culture of inclusion. We have a very strong commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and ESG in our organization. Any day of the week, we really doubled down in the pandemic to invest in lots of opportunities for people to participate in the things that we were doing. But you can see here, sort of the types of things that we do on an ongoing basis to really support a culture of inclusion in the firm. So that was during the pandemic. Now we've taken sort of another fresh look in the last couple of months, and we're really dialing in on this choice piece even more specifically. We're really helping people to take control of their lives That's what feels really out of control right now. There's so many things happening in the world and we feel a little out of control. So we want our people to feel a sense of control. They can decide where they work, how they work, when they work, and we're even moving toward giving them more of a sense of say, self-actualization around what types of things they work on, what things are meaningful to them. And we're exploring different ways to be able to give people choice in even the assignments that they're working on. So everything that they're doing is aligned to their purpose and their ambitions. So that looks like this as we break it into sort of a more granular level. We talked about the flexible ways of working. We are really working hard on protecting people's time for rejuvenating, time away, so people are not interrupted during their vacations, and protected time for learning. We also are creating what we call a team health index. So within work groups, we're taking a regular poll to make sure that the groups are high functioning, high performing teams, not just from an output perspective, but from a mental health and well-being perspective. So that's new, and that's a really important part of our initiatives moving forward. Total rewards, we're enhancing options around mental health, around parent-related needs and supports. We are really looking to personalize our tech experience. So the digital employee experience, we're taking some steps there to make that a more personalized experience. And then really more choice in benefits and more visibility around the breadth of our benefits. I don't know if this happens in your organization, but sometimes you ask, people say, I wish we had X benefit. And you say, well, actually we do. And you wonder, oh, maybe we're not providing information in a way that's digestible so people can actually see what it is that we offer. And then finally, in the development arena, this is really a big part of our effort, because like I said, it is the glue for the culture, and that is leadership development for everyone at every level, because everyone is a leader in some way. So we're doubling down on our investments in leadership, in learning, learning to be more personalized through what we call Astra, which is our assistant. It's like our voice assistant in our digital assistant in the firm. It's kind of like your Siri or your what's the Amazon one? I'm forgetting. Anyway, you get the idea. And then finally, this culture of listening. We're going to continue to double down on our employee listening in many different forms to be sure that we are hearing what our people need, because the circumstances are ever changing.
Claudia, if I can jump in, we have a question coming through around protected time and how does that work at PwC? Or at other clients as well.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. I didn't see that we had a question. On my view screen, it doesn't show the question. So protected time, we've done it a couple of different ways. We've actually, for example, the week of the 4th of July holiday, we are shutting the firm down. So that's one way to protect time, is to actually tell everybody they have to stop working. In our business, we're 24/7. We have, I'll say it, a problem stopping. So for our business, that's a solution that works really well. So we have a week, holiday week in the summer, and then a holiday week in the wintertime. So that's a way we can definitely protect time and, in a way, force and encourage our people to rejuvenate. So we very much look forward to those breaks. But even in the every week on Fridays, we have the end of the day on Friday. So that lasts, from noon on, it's a no meeting zone. And we really encourage people to refrain from having meetings so people can have time, either think time for heads down work, or they can spend it, we call it Fridays anyway. You can spend it any way you want. You could do some learning. You could do some, some of the sort of development work that you normally wouldn't have time to do. So that's how we look at protected time. Any follow-up question to that? Okay, great. All right. And then this just one last point here with sort of the way we're thinking. I talked about leadership as being such a really important component to the way you protect your culture. We have sort of a triangle leadership structure for our employees here, and it works really well. We have what we call a relationship leader, who's sort of that person that is responsible for an employee's development. We have a career coach who can sort of be more informal, provide informal coaching on a regular basis to an employee. And then we have what we're calling a connectivity partner. And this is kind of a newer element to this, which is, really overseeing sort of the deployment of a particular individual. So we have sort of 3 people surrounding each employee to make sure they have a team that's looking out for them, for their development, and they're there for them to help them manage things as they come up, career decisions and things like that. So I think that's a really unique way to structure and a very effective way to support people in the organization. So last thing here, we're not done yet. It's an ever-changing world, and this conversation is continuing. So we're looking to re-engineering our whole talent function to be a little bit more agile and more focused on continuous improvement. We're really focused on upskilling our people and reskilling for different types of roles, because we want people to have mobility in the organization. So that type of skilling really does help to encourage mobility across the organization, which is really important when you think about risk for any of your businesses where you have specialized talent that you'd be in trouble if they left. Upskilling people around that function really does help to mitigate risk for your organization, because if some of those folks end up leaving, it can be very, very difficult for the organization. So you want to protect that institutional knowledge. And then finally, we're really thinking a lot about continuing to strengthen that culture around care and well-being. And we're really, relying on our leaders to be a big support in that way as we establish new ways of working in our hybrid structure. So last thing I want to say here is these are our learnings. I'm not going to go through them in great detail, but I wanted you to have them because these are sort of our own ahas about this process as we went through it. So this is your takeaway here, but what are I'll say the truths about decision-making when it comes to workforce. You got to have a vision and you got to share it with your people. You got to create it with them and not tell it to them. You want to really think about who are the different groups in your organization and take a human-centered design approach. What are those journeys and the places within those journeys that are going to matter the most? Be agile. Don't get too, focused on one path because the world is changing and needs and sentiments change along with it. Co-create, bring people into the conversation, build ownership, making sure as you start to change policies and procedures and processes, et cetera, be clear about who owns what. Dream big. The world is changing, and the same way we've always done things is not working. So, engage your people to help think about what could this look like. Make it experience driven. We already touched on that. Really focus on tech. How can you enable greater efficiency and, let's say, reduce friction in the employee experience to make everything work better and be a more pleasant experience? And then most importantly, celebrate the success, because when everybody has a hand in it, it's important to stop every so often and say, hey, look at this milestone. We've done something really great. That pride, that's a pride builder and gets people excited about working for a company when we've all run over the mountain together. I see there's a hand raised, but I can't see who it is. So speak up if there is. Is there a hand? Or I don't have view of everybody on the screen. So if you have something to say, just speak up. Okay, so before we get to the next section, which is the last, any questions on our PwC journey? Any insights to share, or I'll just open it up.
Hey, Claudia, can I just make mention of a couple things? Would that be all right? Yeah. So, look, I know many of you have probably sort of listened to some of this content and it's like, wow, there's a lot going on there. I think one key takeaway for at least me and my experience in my little world of working as a partner at PwC with the average age of, let's call it 28 to 30 on my team of staff, is it's really come at the top with a lot of this. It's a lot to embark on, but I've noticed that a change in the way that I operate and act, and I'll just say, you know, the way that my partner mentors or bosses, you know, behaved with me is certainly not how I'm doing it today with my staff, because the workforce has changed. And so I would just kind of encourage you to think about that. It's a little bit more upbeat, it feels like these days. It's a little bit more of a care element and acumen to things. It's not, hey, can you go do this reconciliation, or hey, can you go do XYZ? You kind of have to start out with, how you doing? Everything going okay? Though, believe it or not, that goes a long way. I do something else, which I think is a pretty good trick, and I wish people would have done it with me, which is, you know, some of us tend to work on the weekends if we need to catch up, or that's the time when we have to do it when we can't do it with our families during the week, et cetera. Try not to send that email over the weekend if it's not urgent, right? I do schedule send, which is a item that I think most of you probably have as well through Outlook or Google if you utilize that, which allows you to set the time when that email gets sent. So instead of sending it on a Saturday evening or Friday evening or Sunday, you can set it up to be sent Monday morning at 8 a.m. You'd be surprised how, because everybody's so connected with their phone, how that makes such a difference. That's all I wanted to say.
I'm so glad you mentioned the schedule send. Protected time on what's supposed to be the weekend is a big deal. And so really, I love that you brought that up, because I have to retrain myself. I'll be honest. There are times when I'm in the middle of, you know, it's Saturday morning at 6 a.m. and I got up and I want to get some work done, and I've got to be careful not to send things to people at the time. It's just not, it's not healthy for them. And it doesn't, nobody needs to action something on a Saturday morning at 6 a.m. So thank you for that. All right. So next section is just really to talk about, well, what does this mean to HR? I mean, this is a lot of stuff. And we've just, if anyone hadn't noticed, right, HR has been through a few things just in the last 2.5 years. So we're kind of worn out. So like Michael said, this is a really, this feels a little overwhelming. So what I want to do is simplify this. I've given you a lot to consider, but I don't want you to walk away like, oh my gosh, you know, this is just so much stuff and we can't do this. I think it boils down to kind of 4 key areas in HR. And if I were running HR right now, I'd say, okay, which one am I going to focus on? I mean, you have to focus on sort of all 4 of them, but where am I really going to lean in? Because these areas really support what I've been talking about throughout the, you know, the first 3 quarters of the presentation. So as we think about this future of work and its continuous evolvement, if you will, we need to think about, 1, taking an experience-based, you know, an approach to the way we are doing, you know, talent strategy. We've got to think differently about what is the experience we're trying to create for people in our organization, because they aren't coming to a place. They aren't going to be in the physical space. So you don't have that benefit. So the level of intentionality around creating experience has to be much greater. And you can't do this yourself. So teaching people in your organization these sort of basics around experience design and how the interactions, every interaction really matters. That's the cultural glue, and making sure people understand they have a role in that is really important. So educating the HR team on just human-centered design principles, pretty simple. Stepping back, looking at your EVP, what was the value proposition before the pandemic? Write it out. Like, actually, has anybody ever done that? Like, what is it? And how is it different today? And if you're not sure, or if you think it's the same, I would encourage you to do listening, because you probably don't have it right. Second, digital leader. I know from my days in HR, we were not, you know, a powerhouse data. We didn't have access to that much data back then. I'm 30 years plus into, so, but there's a lot of data. And rather than thinking about, you know, kind of what are we seeing, thinking about what does it mean? We need to provide talent intelligence and get out in front of decision-making for the business. And really think about the relationship we have with IT. because what we did during the pandemic is we loaded up all kinds of great tech to help people because we were kind of in a crisis. But now we've got this giant pile of tech that's really hard for people to navigate. So partnering with IT and looking for solutions around, how can we create a more consumer grade omni-channel type HR experience for people. You got to rely on your partners to help that happen. Third is being a decision partner to the business, really understanding, the business strategy and aligning the people agenda to more agilely serve those needs. Again, agility is key as we look at, all of the disruption happening in the world. We really don't know how it's going to hit businesses over the next 6 to 12 to 18 months. And we have to really think about being agile. And then finally, capability builder. More and more, we've got to focus on how we're going to source the right talent, but more importantly, coming at it from the standpoint of how are we going to build the right capabilities for the future. We can't focus on sort of the people and the roles. We have to focus a little bit more on the capabilities so that we can, upskill and reskill those folks that we have and anticipate those needs as our businesses are changing. So that's at a high level. I have a slide on each one of these, but I'm going to kind of go quickly because I want to make sure we have time for conversation. Why is this not advancing? I'm telling you, I've got some technology problems today. Hello. Oops, there it goes. I guess I just had a lag. Okay, polling question 3. We'll take a quick poll. Beyond talent acquisition, what is the top priority for your HR team in 2022? Single choice. Greater focus on employee experience, focus on upskilling and reskilling talent, leveraging data to provide greater talent intelligence, or more agility in supporting the needs of the business. So be interested to see what the group says. I think we should have music during this time. All right. Here we are. Greater focus on employee experience, almost 40%. Upskilling and reskilling talent, good. Leveraging data. Yeah, which unfortunately means it ties to the upskilling, reskilling talent. You really have to make sure you are upskilling your HR team on the ability to leverage data and talent intelligence, to provide talent intelligence. And then finally, greater agility in supporting the needs of the business. Yeah, workforce planning is going to be a big focus. So again, can't do everything, can't focus on everything. Just only so many people to and only 24 hours in a day. But leaning into one thing is a good strategy to function effectively in the as we move into the next year. Okay, so we talked a little bit about what does this mean? Experienced champion. Get the fundamentals right. We're understand. What are the right. What's the right comp and benefit structure to help, underpin the employee experience effectively. I talked about looking at your EVP and, how is your employee experience differentiated? You need to be conscious about what that is. What is the experience you're trying to create? And then making sure that you're doing all of this work inclusively, because if you're going to do experience design work and really sort of map out those journeys, you've got to make sure your personas are inclusive and not just sort of hitting the main, sort of the obvious folks, because you want to make sure you capture those outliers, the dimensions of diversity across your organization. Digital leader. And I will provide a copy of these slides. So if you want to sort of refer to some of these things, you'll have access to that. But this strong partnership between HR and IT that doesn't always exist. I would really suggest, really fostering that relationship, because it can be so important in the outcomes of the digital employee experience. There are so many tech options right now out in the marketplace. It is kind of mind-blowing. So make sure you're evaluating those options carefully and understanding, what's really going to serve your business as you look to add or change out technology. data-driven insights we talked about. And then of course, right now, working with IT to maintain security, privacy, and controls. We lose a little bit of that as people are working from anywhere, and we want to make sure we protect the organization. Decision partner, we're talking here just that idea of agility, really being close partners to the business to anticipate needs versus being reactive. And then the recruiting and hiring from within, that mobility practice can be very beneficial to the business. So strengthening mobility is, I think, working with the business to do that is a really great way to, mitigate risk in the organization. And then this capability builder, learning and skills development is at the core of this. We are, I think the trend we're seeing in the market is moving towards, capturing skills. Are you thinking about things like badging and getting additional credentials? That's, we're going to be hiring people without college degrees. If we're going to find the people to work in some of the roles in our what were traditionally degreed positions, we have to find ways of, classifying different people by the skills that they have so that we can understand how they can take, they can work in some of the roles and have the capabilities that we need. Anyway, so that's what I got. What I'd love to do now is just open the conversation up to the entire room and just chat, talk about questions, share things that any of you are doing in your organizations that you think might be beneficial to other organizations. The next 20 minutes are open for whatever, and if we end early, that's okay too. So I'll just pause. All right. If we have no other questions, I'll ask Michael or anybody else in the group if they have anything to add from the PwC side.
This is Peter Raymond at Beckport. I just want to say I thought it was a very helpful presentation. Great to go through this and kind of hear what some other people are thinking. So we really appreciate it. Thanks for the time today.
You bet. Yeah, I always enjoy talking about these things. And if there's anything that we can do to help with any circumstances that you're facing, I mean, every organization is unique, and we have just an incredible toolbox of different types of accelerators, of different types of, really easy ways to get at some of these things in more discrete ways. And then we can certainly obviously help in broader, consulting ways, but, we can scale anything to meet the needs of organizations of all sizes. And if nothing else, a conversation's free. We're here to have a chat with you about anything that is on your mind, and don't hesitate to reach out, because we're partners with the organization, with Harvest, and we want to make sure that we're here to support you.
Yeah, and I was just going to sort of make mention of the same thing. I think, and thanks, Peter, for those comments. I think the other thing I would say to all of you is, I know we've kind of talked at you quite a bit. There's a lot of content here. You'll be able to get copies of it. I don't think, we're communicating to you as PwC, to an HR organization of your particular companies of, hey, you got to take all this on to help, or, right the ship. But have a thought about, are there potentially gaps or places where, hey, maybe this may work? Try to institute maybe 1 or 2 of these things versus 10 of them right out of the gate. The other thing that we've had many conversations with you all individually, particularly on the finance team, is, we bring you guys together as part of these webcasts. Try to share and reach out to one another. It doesn't have to be that we're the conduit in between you. You're a group of companies that are all going through the same thing. You may not sell the same widget or the same service, but you probably have a very similar workforce or similar workforces across many of the different businesses under Harvest. And it doesn't hurt to act as each other as sounding boards. And that's what we hope you guys kind of do through some of this as well.
Super. Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. I hope you took some nuggets here and there, and we'll definitely send the deck as a follow-up item. Hope you all have a great rest of the day. Take care.